The auction hall was filled with noise. The smell of smoke and sweat hung heavy in the air. Bright lights burned from above, making the place feel hot and restless. Dozens of alien buyers sat in the rows, their strange eyes watching the stage with hunger. They were waiting for the next slaves to be sold. Ethan Varick stood behind the curtain, his jaw tight, his hands shaking slightly. He had worked for the syndicate for years, following orders without question, selling stolen goods, weapons, even people. It was dirty work, but it kept him alive. He had told himself it was just business, never personal, never his choice, but tonight something felt different. The slaver chief shoved a datapad into his hands. "You know your task," the alien growled, his voice like grinding stone. "Sell the widow and the child. Don't fail us." Ethan looked at the screen. 2 names, 2 numbers, 2 lives reduced to property. He closed his eyes for a moment, then walked toward the stage, his boots heavy on the metal floor. The curtain opened, and the crowd grew silent. On the stage stood a woman and a child, both chained, both thin, both trembling. The woman had long dark hair falling over her shoulders, her skin a pale blue, her silver eyes filled with pain. Scars crossed her arms like old maps of suffering. Beside her stood her daughter, small, fragile, clutching her mother's dress with tiny fingers. Tonight, Ethan's voice cracked slightly as he raised the datapad. "We present a rare pair, an alien widow and her child, loyal, obedient, strong enough to serve." His words felt like ash in his mouth. The crowd leaned forward, their whispers filling the room. The girl hid behind her mother, her eyes wide with fear. The widow did not beg. She did not speak. She only stood tall, holding her child close. Her silence screamed louder than any cry. Bids started quickly, rough voices calling numbers, hands raised high, the hall filled with greedy shouts. But Ethan's heart pounded. Each bid felt like a hammer striking his chest. He looked at the widow again. Her silver eyes met his for a single moment, and something broke inside him. He remembered another time, long ago, when his own sister had been taken by raiders. He had been too weak to stop it, too afraid to fight. He had promised himself he would never care again, never let himself feel. But now, staring at this mother and her child, he felt the old wound tearing open. The slaver chief glared at him from the side, motioning for him to close the sale. But Ethan froze, his hands tight on the gavel, his throat dry. The hall waited. Buyers shouted in confusion. The widow's daughter whispered something, so soft he barely heard it. "Please," she said, her voice trembling, "don't." That single word crushed him, the sound of innocence begging for mercy. The room seemed to spin. Sweat dripped down his back. The gavel grew heavy in his hand. He slammed it down. The hall erupted in cheers. But then his words shocked them all. "They're not for sale," he said, his voice strong, his eyes burning with defiance. The crowd fell into silence. Buyers shouted in anger. The slaver chief's face twisted in rage. Guards moved forward, their weapons drawn. The widow stared at him, disbelief and hope flashing across her eyes. Her daughter clung tighter to her. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between them and the guards. "I won't do it," he growled, his voice carrying through the hall. "Not this time, not them." The syndicate guards advanced. The crowd roared in chaos. But Ethan's heart had made its choice. For the first time in years, he wasn't just following orders, he was breaking them. And in that moment, the story truly began. The auction hall shook with anger. Buyers slammed their fists against the seats, shouting for blood. The slaver chief barked orders, his voice drowned by the chaos. Guards raised their shock rifles, advancing across the stage. The widow pulled her daughter closer, her trembling hands wrapping like iron around the child's shoulders. Ethan stood firm, his chest rising and falling. The gavel lay shattered at his feet. His voice cut through the storm. "I said they are not for sale." The words echoed like thunder. Silence fell for a breath. Then the hall erupted again. The first guard lunged forward, his rifle raised. Ethan reacted on instinct. His fist struck the alien's jaw. The guard stumbled back, crashing into the curtain. The crowd gasped. They were used to traitors obeying orders, never fighting back. The slaver chief roared, "You dare defy the syndicate, human!" His eyes glowed with fury. "You sign your death tonight." Ethan's mind raced. He knew the price of betrayal. The syndicate did not forgive, they did not forget. But when he looked back at the widow and her daughter, their eyes wide with fear, his choice hardened. He could not let them fall into the hands of these monsters. He grabbed the chains from the widow's wrists, snapping the lock with a hidden cutter from his belt. Her eyes widened, silver flashing in disbelief. "Run," he hissed, but she hesitated. "They will kill you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan shook his head. "Better me than you." The daughter whimpered, clinging to her mother's waist. Ethan pulled them both forward, dodging another guard. Plasma bolts burned the air around them. The stage filled with smoke. Alarms wailed across the market. They crashed through the side door, running into narrow metal corridors. The sound of boots thundered behind them. The slaver chief's voice echoed through loudspeakers. "Stop them. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary." Ethan led them through twisting hallways, his memory of the market's underbelly guiding him. He had smuggled weapons here before. He knew which paths led to shadows, which tunnels ended in traps. Still, every corner felt dangerous, every sound a threat. The widow stumbled, nearly falling. Ethan caught her arm, her skin cold against his palm. "Keep moving," he urged. "Don't look back." But her gaze was fixed on him, confusion mixing with fear. "Why?" she asked, her voice raw. "Why risk everything for us?" Ethan did not answer at once. His throat tightened. Memories of his sister flashed in his mind. Her screams, the chains, his failure, his silence years ago. Because no one saved her, he finally whispered, "Because I can't let it happen again." The widow said nothing, but something shifted in her eyes, a spark, faint but alive. They reached the cargo tunnels, rusty doors hanging loose, broken pipes dripping steam. Ethan pushed them inside. The dim light painted their faces in ghostly glow. He sealed the door behind them with a steel rod. The sound of pounding fists quickly followed, guards trying to break through. The child pressed close to her mother, her small voice shaking. "Will they catch us?" Ethan knelt, meeting her frightened eyes. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly. The girl blinked, then slowly nodded, as if believing him gave her strength. The pounding grew louder, metal groaning under heavy strikes. Time was running out. Ethan pulled a blaster from his belt, its charge low but still deadly. "We move to the docks," he said. "If we reach my ship, we have a chance." The widow frowned. "A ship? You mean to flee?" Ethan gave a grim smile. "Unless you'd rather go back on stage." Her lips pressed tight. Then she shook her head. "No," she whispered. "Never again." The door burst open. Guards stormed in, their weapons flashing. Ethan fired back. Bolts of light cracked through the tunnel. Sparks showered from pipes. The widow shielded her daughter behind a crate. Ethan dropped 2 guards, but more pressed forward, their growls filling the passage. The widow grabbed a loose metal rod, her hand shaking but her grip fierce. When a guard lunged at Ethan, she struck the alien across the skull. The guard collapsed. She stared at the weapon in her hand, stunned by her own courage. Ethan glanced at her, a flicker of respect crossing his face. "Not bad," he said quickly, ducking another shot. Together they fought, side by side, a human and a widow who had once been only a victim. When the last guard fell, the tunnel lay silent, smoke curling from the broken lights. Ethan lowered his weapon, breathing hard. He looked at the widow and her child, their faces pale but alive. "We have to keep moving," he said. She nodded slowly, still holding the rod. The child squeezed her hand, and for the first time since the auction began, the widow's lips trembled into a faint smile. They ran deeper into the tunnels, footsteps echoing like drums, danger waiting in every shadow. But now, something had changed. They were no longer prisoners waiting to be sold. They were fugitives, and Ethan had become their shield. Far above, the slaver chief slammed his clawed hand against the console, his voice a growl. "Find them. Find the traitor and the widow. Bring me their heads." The hunt had begun, and Ethan knew there was no turning back. The tunnels stretched like a maze beneath the market. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp tang of burning wires. Ethan's boots hit the floor hard as he pulled the widow and her child forward. Behind them came the echo of shouts and the heavy steps of guards. The hunt was closing in. Celera, the widow, clutched her daughter close, her breath ragged. Yet her silver eyes burned with something new, not just fear but defiance. She had spent years in chains, silenced and beaten down, but now, running beside this strange human who had chosen to break the rules, she felt a fragile spark of hope. The child stumbled, nearly falling. Ethan scooped her up with one arm, carrying her against his chest. "Hold tight," he told her, his voice calm but firm. Her small hands gripped his shirt, her eyes wide. Celera reached for them, her heart hammering as they ran deeper. The tunnels forked into 3 paths. Ethan stopped for a split second. Listening, he could hear the pounding boots behind them, growing louder. From the left came the faint hum of machinery, from the right the smell of fuel. He chose right, racing toward the docking bays. Alarms blared overhead, red lights flashing across the ceiling. Automated voices shouted warnings in alien tongues. Security breach, fugitives escaping, lockdown initiated. Heavy metal gates began to slide down across corridors, sealing paths one by one. "Move," Ethan growled, pushing his body faster. Celera kept close, the child's weight slowing him but not enough to stop. They slipped under a closing gate just in time, sparks raining down as it slammed shut behind them. The guards on the other side roared in frustration, pounding the barrier. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with broken cargo crates, half-functioning loaders, and rusted shipping containers. Shadows stretched long under flickering lights. Ethan slowed, setting the girl down. "Stay close," he warned, scanning the darkness. Celera whispered, "They will not stop. They will hunt until we are dead." Ethan gave her a grim smile. "Then we make sure we're not easy prey." The sound of footsteps grew closer, echoing off the walls. Ethan spotted a half-broken loader unit, sparks flicking from its arm. He darted forward, pulling open a panel. Wire spilled out. He worked quickly, his hands moving with the skill of an old smuggler. Celera frowned, confused. "What are you doing?" Ethan glanced at her. A distraction. The loader's eyes flickered alive, its arms jerking as it moved forward. When the first squad of guards entered the chamber, the machine let out a mechanical roar, swinging its arm wildly, smashing crates into the floor. The guards cursed, firing at the machine. Its frame sparked and shook, buying Ethan precious moments. He grabbed Celera's hand, pulling her and the child toward a hidden service hatch. "This way," he urged. The hatch was narrow, dark, but it led deeper toward the docks. Inside the hatch the air was damp, the metal walls dripping with condensation. The child pressed against her mother, whispering, "I'm scared." Celera kissed her forehead softly. "Be brave, little one. We are almost free." Her voice was gentle, but her own fear shook behind it. Ethan crawled ahead, his shoulders scraping the walls. The tunnel twisted down into shadows, finally opening into another corridor. Faint lights spilled from the far end, and beyond it, the muffled thrum of engines. The docks. Ethan breathed, relief flashing in his eyes. But his relief vanished when shadows moved at the far end, more guards blocking the exit. Rifles aimed. Celera gasped, pulling her daughter back, but Ethan stepped forward, his hand tight on his blaster, his voice low, "Stay behind me." The guard shouted, demanding surrender. Ethan's finger hovered on the trigger, his mind racing. They couldn't win a straight fight, not outnumbered and cornered. Then he noticed something, a vent above the corridor, wide enough for a child. Maybe even Celera if they crawled. His eyes darted to her, then to the vent, climb. He whispered sharply, "Take her, get through, I'll hold them off." Celera's eyes widened. "No, you will die." Ethan shook his head. "I'll buy time. Just go." For a moment she stared at him, torn between fear and trust. Then she lifted her daughter, pushing her into the vent, the child's small body slipping inside. Celera climbed after, her fingers gripping the edges. Before disappearing, she looked back at Ethan, their eyes locking, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare stop fighting." The guards advanced, their weapons glowing. Ethan raised his blaster. Fire lit the corridor, bolts of plasma streaking through the air. The sound was deafening. The walls shook, smoke filled the space. Ethan moved like a man with nothing left to lose, every shot buying them another breath, another heartbeat. Above, Celera crawled through the vent, her daughter ahead of her, tears streaking her face as she heard the sounds of battle below. But then, through the smoke, she heard Ethan's voice, still shouting, still fighting. The vent opened into a higher cargo bay. Celera pulled her daughter out. Collapsing against the floor, she looked back through the vent, the glow of blaster fire flashing in bursts, her heart twisted. Ethan fought like a storm, but the guards kept coming, their voices snarling, their boots pounding. Yet his defiance did not break. For the first time in years, he was not just surviving, he was protecting. And far above, Celera realized something she had never allowed herself to feel before. This human was not a traitor, not a slaver, not another cruel hand in the dark. He was their shield, their chance, their hope. The hunt was not over, but their escape had begun. The cargo bay was silent except for the faint hum of engines above. Celera pulled her daughter close, both of them trembling, her silver eyes fixed on the vent behind them. Flashes of blaster fire still lit the shadows inside. Ethan's voice echoed faintly, sharp commands, the sound of defiance against impossible odds. The little girl whispered, "Will he come back?" her tiny hands clutching her mother's dress. Celera forced herself to smile, though her heart raced with fear. "Yes, he will," she whispered back. "He is not like the others." Her voice cracked, but she held onto the words as if they were truth. Moments later, the vent shook. Heavy footsteps rang out, and Ethan dragged himself up through the opening, his shirt torn, smoke clinging to his skin. A streak of blood ran down his arm, but his eyes were alive, fierce. He fell onto the cargo bay floor, panting. Celera rushed to him, kneeling. "You're hurt," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. Ethan waved her off. "I've been worse," he muttered, then looked at the child. "You two made it out. That's what matters." The girl crawled closer, her small hand touching his arm, her eyes wide. "You saved us," she whispered. Ethan's heart tightened at the innocence in her voice. He gave a faint smile. "I said I would." They rested for a moment, the cargo bay dim, shadows dancing across the walls. Celera studied him in silence. She had seen many humans, most cruel, most indifferent, but this one was different. He had broken rules that no traitor dared to break. He had chosen them over profit, over safety. She could not understand why. Finally she asked, her voice low, "Why risk yourself for us? You owe us nothing." Ethan's gaze dropped to the floor, his jaw clenched. "I owed someone once," he said quietly, "and I failed her. I swore I'd never let happen again." Celera tilted her head, her scars catching the dim light. "Someone close." Ethan nodded. "My sister," his voice raw. "Raiders took her when I was younger. I froze. I did nothing, and I've lived with that ever since." He looked at her then, his eyes sharp. "When I saw you and your daughter on that stage, I saw her again. I couldn't just stand there." For the first time in years, Celera felt something stir in her chest. Not fear, not despair, but a fragile thread of trust. She reached out, placing her hand lightly on his, her touch soft but steady. "Then maybe this time you did not fail," she said. Before Ethan could respond, the sound of boots echoed in the distance. The hunt had not stopped. The syndicate would not rest until they were caught. Ethan stood quickly, his expression hardening. "We move now." He led them through the bay, past broken crates and half-dead machines. At the far end, a service door creaked open, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper toward the docks. The air smelled of fuel and rust. The child clung to her mother, her small voice trembling. "Where will we go?" Ethan glanced back. "My ship. If we reach it, we can leave this place, start fresh." Celera frowned. "And then what?" "The syndicate will chase us across the stars." Ethan smirked. "Then let them chase. I've been running my whole life. One more time won't kill me." As they walked, the girl tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "You're not afraid?" she asked. Ethan chuckled softly. "Of course I'm afraid," he admitted, "but being afraid doesn't mean you stop. It means you keep going anyway." The child tilted her head, as if trying to understand, then gave a small smile. The passage opened into another chamber, this one stacked with fuel drums and power cells. Celera's eyes narrowed. She could feel danger. "We should not stay," she warned, but it was too late. Shadows moved between the crates. A a group of bounty hunters stepped out, their armor dark, their eyes glowing with scanners. The leader sneered. The human traitor and his prizes. His voice dripped with greed. The syndicate pays well for you, alive or dead. Weapons clicked as they raised their rifles. Ethan pushed Celera and her daughter behind a stack of crates, whispering, "Stay low, don't move." Then he stepped out, his blaster steady, his voice calm. "You'll have to earn it." The firefight exploded. Light and smoke filled the chamber. Ethan ducked behind barrels, firing back. Celera held her daughter close, her heart pounding. But when one of the hunters broke past Ethan, charging toward them, Celera grabbed a fallen pipe, striking with desperate force. The hunter stumbled. Ethan finished him with a quick shot. Breathing hard, Celera stared at the weapon in her hands, her chest heaving. Ethan glanced back. "You're stronger than you think," he said quickly before turning to face the next wave. The fight dragged on, the sound of weapons echoing. But together they pushed through, Ethan's skill and Celera's unexpected courage turning the tide. Finally, the last hunter fell, smoke curling above his body. Silence settled again. Ethan leaned against a crate. Exhausted, Celera stood near him, her daughter clutching her leg. For a long moment their eyes met, two broken souls bound by survival. Neither spoke, but something unspoken passed between them, something beyond fear, beyond the chase. The bond had begun, and neither could deny it. The chamber still smelled of smoke and burnt fuel. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, his blaster trembling slightly in his hand. Celera sat against a crate, holding her daughter close, both of them breathing hard, their silver eyes reflecting the dim light. For a moment it felt like silence, but Ethan knew better. Silence in syndicate territory never lasted long. He leaned down, speaking quickly. "We can't stay here. Hunters will keep coming." Celera nodded, her voice low. Then where Ethan's eyes hardened, "There's an old contact of mine near the outer docks. He owes me a favor. He can hide us until we get off-world." They moved quickly through the maze of passages. Every shadow felt alive, every echo like footsteps behind them. The girl held her mother's hand, her eyes wide, but steady. Ethan glanced back often, his mind split between watching for danger and watching them. It was strange, he realized, to care this much, to feel responsible not just for himself, but for two fragile lives. The outer docks came into view at last. The smell of grease and engine fumes thick in the air. Neon lights flickered above half-broken ships. Workers shouted. Cargo haulers rumbled. The chaos of the docks almost drowned out the danger. Almost. A man stepped out from behind a stack of containers, his face rough, scars across his cheek, his eyes sharp. "Ethan," he said, his tone cold but not unfriendly. "I heard rumors. Didn't believe them until now." Ethan lowered his blaster slightly. "Rogan, I need help," he said. "We need a place to lie low, just for a while." Rogan's gaze slid past Ethan, landing on Celera and her daughter. His eyes narrowed. "So it's true. You stole from the syndicate. An alien widow and a child. Ethan, do you know what you've done?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know exactly what I've done," Rogan smirked, shaking his head. "You always were reckless, but this is suicide." Ethan stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Will you help or not?" After a pause, Rogan sighed. "Fine. Follow me." He led them into a hidden storage unit, the walls lined with crates, the hum of machinery muffled outside. Celera looked around uneasily, clutching her daughter tighter. Rogan poured a drink, sitting back on a crate, his eyes studying Ethan. "You've made powerful enemies. The syndicate won't stop. They'll burn half the docks to ash to find you." Ethan's tone was firm. "I don't care. I'm not giving them up." Celera glanced at him, surprise flickering across her face. She had heard men speak boldly before, but not like this, not with such weight. It was not pride, it was conviction. Rogan smiled thinly. "Brave words, Ethan, but words won't save you, or them." His gaze lingered too long on Celera, something cold in his eyes. She shifted closer to Ethan without realizing it. The girl tugged at her mother's dress, whispering, "I don't like him." Celera hushed her gently, but her heart agreed. Something about Rogan felt wrong. Hours passed. Rogan offered food and a place to rest. Ethan sat by the door, blaster across his knees, sleep tugging at his eyes. Celera watched him, saw the way his head dipped, but never fully relaxed. Even in exhaustion, he kept guard, and she felt a strange comfort. But comfort did not last. Celera woke to the sound of whispers. Rogan's voice low, speaking into a comm device. Yes, I have them, the human too. You'll get your payment, double for the widow and child. Her blood turned to ice. She grabbed her daughter's hand and moved quickly to Ethan. Shaking his shoulder, his eyes snapped open, she whispered, "He betrayed us." Ethan was on his feet in an instant, blaster raised. Rogan froze mid-sentence, then smirked. "What did you expect? Ethan, you think anyone risks the syndicate for free?" Ethan's voice was steel. "I thought you were a friend." Rogan laughed bitterly. "Friendship doesn't pay debts." The door burst open, syndicate enforcers storming in, weapons drawn. Celera pulled her daughter behind crates. Ethan fired. The room exploded with chaos. Rogan ducked behind a container, shouting, "Alive! They want them alive." Ethan growled, his shots precise. 2 enforcers fell. The rest pushed forward. Celera picked up a fallen blade, her hands shaking. When one enforcer charged toward them, she slashed wildly, the blade cutting deep. The man fell, blood steaming across the floor. Her daughter clung to her leg, whispering in terror. Ethan fought with fury, every move protecting them, but more enforcers poured in, the odds turning against him. Finally, Rogan stepped out, aiming a rifle at Ethan's back. "It's over, Ethan. Drop it." Celera's heart raced. She looked at Ethan, saw his muscles tense, his finger twitch on the trigger. He did not drop his weapon. Instead, he turned slowly, his eyes burning. "No," he said. Before Rogan could fire, Ethan's blaster flashed. The shot slammed into Rogan's chest. The man fell without a sound, shock frozen on his face. The remaining enforcers hesitated, their leader cursing, "Fall back, regroup." They retreated into the corridor, dragging their wounded, leaving the storage unit in ruins. Ethan lowered his weapon, his chest heaving. Celera looked at him, her daughter pressed against her side, the air thick with smoke and betrayal. "You killed your friend," Celera whispered. Ethan shook his head. "He stopped being my friend the moment he chose gold over you." For a long moment, neither spoke, the weight of the night pressing down on them. But something stronger rose in Celera's chest, not fear this time, but faith. She realized then that this human would stand against the whole galaxy if he had to, and for the first time in years, she believed survival was possible. The storage unit was silent after the gunfire faded. Smoke curled from broken crates. The metallic scent of blood hung heavy. Ethan stood still, his blaster lowering slowly. Rogan's body lay sprawled on the ground, eyes wide, chest smoking from the shot. Celera held her daughter close. The little girl buried her face against her mother's side. Trembling, Celera looked at Ethan, her voice quiet but sharp. "You killed him." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes dark. "He was going to sell you, both of you. If I had hesitated, you'd already be in chains again." Celera said nothing, her chest rising and falling. Deep inside, she knew he was right. Still, the image of the dead man burned in her mind. Betrayal had many faces, and now it smelled of ash. Ethan moved to the door, peering into the corridor beyond. The enforcers had retreated, but not for long. "They'll be back, and next time they'll bring more," he muttered. "We have to reach my ship before they close the docks completely." The child whispered, "I don't want to go back. Please don't let them take us." Ethan crouched down, his voice soft but steady. "I won't, I promised." Her wide eyes searched his, and she nodded slowly, as if trusting his word more than her own fear. They slipped into the corridor, moving quickly, the lights flickering above, shadows dancing across the walls. Ethan led the way, blaster in hand. Every sense alert, Celera followed, keeping her daughter close, her silver eyes scanning the dark corners. They passed through fuel depots and repair stations, every step heavy with danger. At one point, voices echoed ahead. A patrol sweeping the hall. Ethan pulled them into a side passage, pressing against the wall. The guards passed close, their boots ringing on the metal floor. The girl clutched her mother tightly, not daring to breathe. When the patrol faded, Ethan whispered, "Come on." At last they reached the outer ring of the docks, but the sight stopped them cold. Heavy gates sealed the main bay. Syndicate banners glowed, red across the walls. Armed enforcers patrolled the platforms. Dozens of them. Ships were locked, guards scanning every face. Solara's breath caught. "It's impossible." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "Not impossible, just costly." He studied the guards, counting their numbers, his mind racing. Before they could plan, a voice crackled through the loudspeakers, deep and mocking. It was the slaver chief, Ethan Varick. The name hissed across the bay. "You have disappointed us, but we are merciful. Surrender the widow and her child, and we will grant you a quick death." The widow's daughter whimpered. Solara's face hardened. She whispered, "He means to break you." Ethan smirked faintly. "He can try." The guards began to sweep the platforms. Closing in, Ethan motioned for them to move back, guiding Solara and the child into the shadows of a half-broken cargo crane. From there they watched, waiting, Ethan's mind working fast. Solara leaned close, whispering, "You cannot fight them all." Ethan met her gaze, his voice steady. "I don't need to fight them all, just enough to get us through." For a long moment they locked eyes, and she saw the steel in him, the quiet fire that refused to bend. Something inside her shifted. She reached out, resting her hand lightly on his arm. "Then we will fight too." Ethan blinked, surprised. "Solara," but her eyes were clear. "I will not hide while you bleed for us. Not anymore." The child looked up at both of them, her small voice trembling but brave. "Me too." Ethan's chest tightened, his throat thick. "No," he said firmly. "You stay with your mother. That's your fight, keeping each other safe." The girl nodded, though her eyes still burned with determination. The sound of boots grew closer, enforcers sweeping the bay. Ethan adjusted his blaster. Solara gripped the metal rod she still carried, her scars catching the dim light. The first squad passed near their hiding place. Ethan waited until the last guard turned his head, then struck a silent shot, dropping the man before he could cry out. Solara moved quickly, slamming her rod against another. The guard fell, groaning. Ethan finished him with a precise shot. The fight exploded again, alarms blaring, enforcers rushing toward them. Ethan shouted, "Run, keep moving," guiding Solara and her daughter across the bay. Blaster fire streaked past them, sparks raining down. The docks became chaos. Solara swung her rod with fierce strength, protecting her child. Ethan covered them, firing at every guard who dared step close. Their escape turned into a running battle, bodies falling behind them. The widow's child clutching her mother's hand, eyes wide with both fear and awe. Finally, they reached the far platform where Ethan's ship waited, a battered freighter tucked in the shadows, its engines cold but ready. He slammed his hand on the panel, the ramp lowering with a hiss. "Inside, go," he barked. Solara rushed up the ramp with her daughter, Ethan covering them until the last moment. He fired one more shot before sprinting after them. The ramp closed behind, blaster bolts hammering the hull. Inside the ship, the hum of systems came alive. Lights flickering, Ethan dropped in a pilot's seat, his hands flying over controls. "Hold on," he growled. Engines roared, the freighter shuddered, lifting from the platform. Outside, enforcers shouted, ships launching in pursuit. The hunt was not over. It had only grown larger. Solara held her daughter in the corner of the cockpit, watching Ethan as he steered them into the black sky. For the first time, she whispered, not in fear, but in wonder, "You chose us over everything, why?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the stars, but his voice was low, almost gentle. "Because for once, choosing you feels right." The stars opened ahead, but danger followed close behind. The final stand was waiting, and Ethan knew he could not run forever. The freighter tore through the night sky, engines groaning as if they might rip apart. Alarms beeped across the cockpit, warning of enemy pursuit. Solara held her daughter close in the corner, the child's eyes wide, her small hands clinging to her mother. Ethan gripped the controls tight, his jaw clenched, his eyes sharp on the stars ahead. On the scanners, bright red dots blinked. Syndicate ships closing fast, sleek hunters built for speed, their voices echoed across the comms. "Ethan Varick, You cannot run. Surrender the aliens, and we may let you live. Ethan smirked grimly. They keep offering mercy they never mean, he muttered, his fingers flying across switches. The freighter rolled hard, dodging the first burst of plasma fire. Sparks showered across the hull. Salera flinched, pulling her daughter tighter. The girl whispered, "We will die." Her voice shaking. Ethan turned his head briefly, his eyes locking with hers. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly. The hunters pressed closer, one firing a missile that streaked across the void. Ethan yanked the controls. The freighter spun. Alarm screamed. The missile grazed the side, exploding into fire. The ship shuddered but held. Salera gasped, fear twisting her heart, but she forced her voice steady. "You can do this," she whispered to him, surprising herself. Ethan's lips curled into a faint smile. "I'll hold you to that." He growled. He led the freighter into a dense asteroid field, massive rocks spinning slowly in the dark. The hunters followed, their engines howling, plasma bolts lighting the shadows. Ethan wove the ship between stone giants, scraping past razor edges. The hunters less skilled, too smashed against asteroids, fireballs blooming. But more remained. The comms crackled again, the slaver chief's voice filling the cabin. "You cannot win, human. Even if you escape tonight, we will hunt you across the stars. There is no end. Surrender the widow and child, and maybe your death will be quick." Ethan's eyes burned, his voice steady and cold. "You don't understand. I'd rather die standing than live on my knees." Salera stared at him, her silver eyes shining, her scars seeming less like marks of pain and more like symbols of survival. She whispered, "You mean that?" Ethan glanced at her, his voice low but fierce, every word. The freighter shook as another blast hit the hull. Systems flickered. Ethan cursed under his breath. "We can't outrun them forever," he muttered. Then his gaze shifted to the largest asteroid. Its surface cracked with deep tunnels. His mind raced. He turned the freighter sharply, diving into the tunnels, hunters firing wildly behind. Salera gasped, clutching her daughter as the ship scraped the walls, sparks flying. Ethan's focus never wavered. "Hold on," he shouted. Inside the tunnels, the hunters struggled, their sleek ships too wide. One slammed into the wall, exploding in flame. Another clipped its wing, spinning into darkness. Ethan darted through, weaving like a ghost. At last they burst out the far side, stars spreading wide. Only 2 hunters remained. Ethan breathed hard, sweat dripping down his face. "Almost," he muttered. He switched to freighter systems, rerouting power. The ship's engines screamed louder. He turned back toward the hunters. Salara's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" she cried. Ethan's voice was steady. "Ending it." The freighter faced the hunters head-on. The enemy pilots laughed, certain of victory, but Ethan flipped the final switch. The freighter's hidden cannons roared. Twin blasts of light shot out, ripping through the hunters. Both ships exploded, the stars lit with fire. Silence filled the cockpit. Only the hum of engines remained. Ethan leaned back in the seat, his chest heaving. Salara's daughter whispered, "We're safe," her voice trembling with wonder. Salara's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Ethan, her voice soft but strong. "You saved us. You chose us when no one else would." Ethan met her gaze, his voice quiet. "I didn't save you. You saved me." For a long moment they sat in silence, the stars stretching endless before them. Ethan finally turned, his voice steady. "Where do you want to go?" Salera held her daughter close, her silver eyes shining. "Somewhere we can live, not as property, not as prey, but as people." Ethan nodded, his hands light on the controls. "Then that's where we'll go." The child smiled faintly. For the first time in years, Salera smiled too, the scars still on her skin, but hope burning in her heart. Behind them, the syndicate raged, but ahead of them stretched freedom, a fragile future born not from chains but from choice. And as the freighter vanished into the stars, Ethan whispered to himself, "They ordered me to sell them. Instead, I gave them my life."